Chief Justice John Roberts entered that hearing, thinking nothing could surprise him, until Jasmine Crockett echoed his own words back at him, leaving the room still and silent. There was a pause in room 2141 of the Rayburn House office building, but not the quiet kind that calms. It was the tense kind, the kind that comes just before something breaks. The session appeared ordinary on paper, another hearing on the calendar, but in that room, something felt off. It was clear something different was about to happen. Chief Justice Roberts sat at the witness table, dressed in a sharp navy suit that likely cost more than many people make in a month. He looked composed, deliberate, maybe even overly assured. He was not new to this. He had testified before Congress multiple times. He knew the process: speak carefully, stay composed, rise above the noise. But this time, the setting felt different. This was not a discussion about broad legal theory. This was about something even seasoned judges sometimes struggle with: judicial ethics. Public frustration had been building. Concerns were growing over possible bias, hidden gifts, and personal relationships that never seemed to appear in official disclosures. The public was paying attention. The cameras were live, and this time the robe offered no cover. Committee members each took their turn. Some asked soft questions. Others tried to walk a careful line, avoiding anything too harsh or too weak. Then her name was called, and the energy in the room shifted. Representative Jasmine Crockett of Texas. She leaned in toward the microphone, her voice quiet but steady, enough to draw focus. "Thank you, Mr. Chairman." Some in the room stopped listening. They had heard of her. A former public defender, new to Congress, known for her direct approach in debates and for not sugarcoating things. But this was a different moment, and across from her sat the highest judge in the country. You could sense some wondering how long she would keep her footing. Justice Roberts stayed composed. He gave her the kind of polite smile people in power have mastered, a careful mix of courtesy and strategy, as if welcoming a thoughtful question. But Crockett was not looking for affirmation. She was there to ask real questions. "Chief Justice," she began, "you have said before that the court operates under strong ethical standards, even without a formal code. Is that correct?" Roberts folded his hands, speaking calmly. "That is correct, Congresswoman. The court follows well-established principles that have guided judicial behavior for a long time." She nodded, flipped to the next page in her binder. "Then help me understand something. If that is true, why was there no disclosure about Justice Merritt's relationship with a political donor involved in a case before the court last year?" That caught people's attention. Cameras clicked, a few heads turned. This time, Roberts did not smile. He adjusted his tie slightly. "I cannot comment on current ethical reviews or matters tied to specific justices." Crockett glanced down, briefly, then looked up again. "But you can speak to precedent, correct?" "Yes." "Good," she continued. "Because from what I understand, and correct me if I am wrong, the Supreme Court has historically used the idea of perceived misconduct as a key standard, that it is not only about breaking the rules, but also whether the public has reason to think something inappropriate may have happened." Roberts shifted slightly in his chair. "Many institutions have considered appearances when evaluating conduct." "Yes," Crockett pressed on. "Then would failing to report a close relationship with someone who could gain from a ruling not appear improper?" Her voice stayed level. She did not raise it. She did not need to. The room was already quiet. Roberts remained outwardly calm, but something had changed. His tone was more cautious. "Congresswoman, I believe we are now moving into hypothetical areas." "I am not," she replied. "I am pointing to documented information from your court's own financial statements." But the most intense part of the session was still ahead. Roberts sat up a little straighter in his chair, one hand resting on the polished surface, his eyes calm but sharp, briefly studying Crockett's expression. She did not look away. Her eyes stayed fixed, and her tone remained firm. "I am reading straight from the court's disclosure files, Chief Justice," she repeated, a bit more slowly now, as if challenging him to deny it. She cleared her throat. "These records are compiled by the administrative staff of the court, and I believe they handle the process properly. But do you personally review them?" she asked, tilting her head just slightly. "Do you take responsibility for ensuring they are accurate and complete?" The silence that followed was brief, but it revealed plenty. "There is a procedure," he said. "Each justice manages their own disclosures. Crockett leaned back in her chair. She did not smile. This was not a moment for that. Instead, she let the pause linger. "Interesting," she said. "Because where I come from, when you are the one checking your own behavior, that is not accountability. That is grading your own test." A few people seated in the gallery exchanged glances. One staffer let out a quiet breath, part laugh, part disbelief. Roberts tried to bring the focus back. "With respect, Congresswoman, the judiciary was designed to function independently from both Congress and the executive branch. Our role is to apply the law, not to respond to political pressure." "No one here is asking you to do that," Crockett responded. "We are not asking you to change your decisions. We are asking why the same issues keep coming up and why they are never addressed." Roberts opened his mouth, but Crockett gently lifted her hand, not to interrupt him, but to transition to her next point. "I spent years inside Texas courtrooms, watching judges speak to young men. Black, brown, white, it made no difference about taking responsibility, about how even the appearance of dishonesty could ruin their futures. So forgive me if I do not accept that the highest court in the land cannot be held to that same level." Roberts adjusted his seat once again. "Congresswoman, I understand your concern. I assure you, we take each issue seriously and handle them through proper internal procedures, with professionalism. There is no binding code," Crockett replied, "and the only review process comes from inside." A pause. "That is like asking a fox to write a report about what happened in the chicken coop." This time, the shift in the room was clear. A few quiet murmurs. Cameras clicked more rapidly. Reporters leaned forward. This was not for spectacle. She was pressing with intent. Roberts drew in a slow breath through his nose. His fingers now gripped the table's edge. Still composed, but now his responses held the tone of someone who realized this was more than he had expected. "The court is open to criticism," he said, "but I must remind the Congresswoman that mutual respect between branches is important." Crockett looked down briefly, then raised her head again. A flash of frustration crossed her face, not because she had lost focus, but because she recognized the word respect was now being used to avoid the actual issue. "I do respect the court," she said. "I respect what it is meant to represent, but respect without honesty does not mean anything. And the voters who sent me here did not choose me to admire your position. They sent me to understand why the rules seem to change depending on who is wearing the robe." Roberts held her gaze for a bit longer now. The difference was small, but it was there. He was no longer looking at a new member of Congress. He was seeing someone prepared to challenge every technical answer he had to offer, and she was not done yet. What followed was not opinion. It came with proof. The next documents in Crockett's folder were slim, only a few pages clipped together, but they carried weight. Not the loud kind, but the kind that makes people go quiet. She slid one paper forward on the table, leaned closer to the microphone. "Chief Justice, are you familiar with Dalton v. Mason County decided by the Fifth Circuit back in 2009? Roberts narrowed his eyes, not confused but clearly assessing the point. "That was a procedural issue related to judicial recusal, if I remember correctly." "You do not," Crockett answered. "It was about a judge who did not recuse himself, even though he had indirect financial ties to a law firm involved in the case. The court ruled that even the possibility of bias was enough to require stepping aside." She tapped the edge of the paper. "And yet just last year, Justice Harland ruled on Minver's Delta Rayla case, where a longtime friend and contributor of his had a lot to gain from the outcome." Roberts stayed quiet for a moment. Crockett leaned slightly forward. No recusal, no explanation, no transparency, and the decision, 5-4. This was not general disapproval. It was a direct hit on the court's already fragile credibility. Roberts exhaled slowly. "Congresswoman, I am not here to argue specific outcomes. I am not asking you to," she replied. "I am asking how a court founded on fairness expects the public to keep faith when its rulings feel more like private arrangements than fair judgments." A few quiet reactions, brief but real. A pen slipped from a staffer's hand and fell to the floor. Roberts leaned toward his microphone. "Your tone is quite strong, and your silence," Crockett answered steadily, "has done more harm." She did not rush. Her words were spaced, clear, deliberate. There is a woman named Carla Jennings in my district. A single mother. Spent 20 years working night shifts at a hospital. Her son was denied college assistance over a small paperwork. Stake. It looked like back taxes were owed. She challenged it, took it as far as she could, only to be told it was final. She paused, eyes on Roberts. But a billionaire with ties to a sitting justice? His case was heard, argued, and ruled on in less than 4 months, and the decision went in his favor. Roberts's eyes tightened, ever so slightly. His hands were now clasped more firmly. He had not expected this level of detail, especially not from her. The court, he replied, has limited capacity. It must be selective in what it hears. That is not evidence of bias. But how it looks, she asked. He said nothing. She asked again, Chief Justice, does appearance matter? He gave a brief nod. Yes, it does. Crockett's voice dropped just a bit. Then I suggest you take a better look at what people are seeing. Because right now they are not seeing justice. They are seeing an institution protecting itself. For the first time, Roberts gave no answer. The room stayed still. The chair remained silent. No one moved to intervene. What was happening felt important. Crockett's voice remained calm. She turned another page. I came here with respect. But I also brought facts, and the facts show that your institution has a problem, a serious one, and it is time to stop ignoring it. But the real shift was still ahead. Not until the Chief Justice recognized who he was up against. His tone changed, everyone could hear it. He leaned in, hands clasped, bracing himself. But now his voice lacked its earlier steadiness. Congresswoman, he said, while I understand your concern, I would caution against drawing conclusions from isolated cases without knowing their full legal context. Crockett did not blink. With respect, Chief Justice, I am not jumping to conclusions. I am connecting the facts. There is a difference. And now she could feel it. The shift in the room. No one was watching Roberts anymore. Every eye was on her. She made her next move. In 2013, she said, lifting another sheet, you gave the commencement address at Harvard Law. You told graduates, and I quote, credibility is your currency. If people stop believing in your integrity, everything else breaks down. Roberts leaned back slightly. That is correct. Then tell me, she said, voice tighter now, how can credibility survive when trust in your court is lower than it has been in decades? When surveys show the majority of Americans believe the court is being seen as more influenced by politics than by legal principle. He did not reply right away, so she kept going. You do not get to spend 20 years building trust, then act surprised when staying quiet about your colleagues starts damaging it. Roberts began to speak, but this time Crockett did not wait. You call it passion. It is not. It is being accurate. I am not yelling, I am not assuming, I am asking why people like Carla Jennings are forced to follow rules that your justices openly ignore. She shifted her tone to something lower. Do you know what it feels like to walk into a courtroom already knowing things are not going to go your way? I do. I have seen young men break down at sentencing because they knew they never stood a real chance because justice was not shaped by fairness but by influence, connections, and access. The room grew even more still. No pens moving, no quiet chatter, only Crockett's voice, clear and sharp. Roberts tried to respond. The court has taken steps. She cut in. Not enough. Not when billionaires fly justices to private resorts, and no one asks questions. Not when decisions affecting millions are made in places no one can look into. Then she said it. You were right about one thing. Credibility is currency. And right now, your court is running a deficit. That line landed harder than anything before. A clerk in the back scribbled it down so fast the page nearly tore. For the first time, Roberts said nothing. He just sat there. Crockett let the moment hold. 2 long seconds of pause. Then she leaned back in her seat, letting her words remain. This was not for cameras. This was not for attention. It was someone finally saying what needed to be said, calling out a court that had become distant, closed off, untouchable. Roberts adjusted his tie again, though it looked more like routine than confidence. The committee chair cleared his throat, ready to shift the discussion. But even he paused, maybe out of respect, maybe unsure how to follow what had just happened. But Crockett was not finished. Not yet. Not until regular Americans had been brought into this too. She She was not here to exchange points with a Supreme Court justice. She was aiming at something more meaningful, something personal for the people watching at home, the ones who might not know court case names but live with the results. She took a breath, then changed how she spoke. Calmer now, more thoughtful, less like a hearing, more like a real talk. There is a man in Odessa, she said. His name is Jorge Salgado. He drives trucks, worked straight through the pandemic, never asked for time off, never made a fuss. But when his brother ended up in a private immigration facility and was refused proper medical care, Jorge filed a legal petition. The court dismissed it. No full review, no discussion. She looked at Roberts. He could not understand why. So I told him, the law is written that way, and the system makes it nearly impossible to fight injustice when the wording of laws shields those with influence. She leaned forward, and your court had a chance to get involved. But you all chose to stay out of it. No explanation, no reasoning, nothing. Roberts remained quiet. Crockett kept going. These are not stories made up to make a point, Chief. Justice. These are real people. They still believe in the law, even after it fails them. They still believe that if they do everything right, someone up high will hear them. She turned, looking at the entire room, not just Roberts. And we all have to ask what happens when they stop believing. What happens when they stop thinking fairness is even an option for anyone without a business, without campaign money, without a seat in a boardroom? Her voice carried something real, not anger, not drama, just truth. She paused before finishing. I became a lawyer because I thought the law could be used to do what is right. I stayed in this field because I learned that fairness depends on the people who enforce it. And today, I am sitting across from one of them. With more reach than most people can imagine, yet unwilling to admit that unchecked power can be a problem, Roberts finally responded, but his voice had lost its usual steadiness. Congresswoman, I understand that some decisions lead to tough consequences, but the court's duty is not to fix outcomes. It is to apply the law as it is written. Crockett gave a small nod. And what if the law is written to protect a few? What if it is used in ways that keep the powerful in charge? Did not wait for him to respond. She already knew he would not. You speak about judicial independence, she said. But independence without accountability is not strength. It is disconnection. Someone whispered in the background. She is right. Just one voice, but one that echoed what others were likely thinking. Crockett turned to another page. This is not just about politics. It is about principle, about showing people like Jorge and Carla that their lives are seen, that their stories do not lose value just because they leave your courtroom. She looked around the room again. Because the truth is, if this court will not correct itself, then it becomes our job, the people's job through us, to ask deeper and more serious questions. The camera stayed on Roberts. His lips were pressed into a flat line. No smile, no expression, just silence. She looked directly at him again. I did not come here to embarrass you. I came to remind you that justice is not about titles. It is not about legacy. It is about the people who still hope that someone in power might actually care. But she had not come this far to just make points. She had one final message, and it was going to stay with them. For a few seconds, no one said a word. The silence had its own weight. Reporters stopped typing, staffers stopped sorting their notes. Even some committee members, those who had been barely paying attention, now sat up. All eyes were on Crockett. Something had changed. Roberts felt it too. He stayed upright, but the edge was gone. His usual method, steady tone, legal phrases, calm distance was not working here, not with her. Crockett slowly closed her folder and placed her hands on the table. When she spoke again, her voice was quiet and thoughtful. You know, growing up in St. Louis, there was this older judge. White man, ex-military, tough as they come. But he used to say something that stuck with me. A courtroom is only as honest as the people brave enough to question it. She looked at Roberts again. I think about that all the time. There was no applause, no dramatic moment, just a pause, as if her words had left a mark. Roberts shifted slightly in his seat but still said nothing. His confidence had not disappeared. It had simply been met by someone who did not treat it as something out of reach. Across the room, Representative Leonard Franks, a veteran from Arizona who rarely spoke during hearings, leaned into his mic and quietly said, Damn, this was not about laws or logic. It was about respect. Crockett showed no reaction. She had not come for praise. Chairman Bledo finally spoke, his voice slower than usual. The committee thanks Representative Crockett for her question. Even he sounded cautious, like rushing past this moment would miss something that needed. Time to land. Roberts reached for his water. His hand moved just slightly, barely noticeable, but Crockett saw it. She looked at him and said plainly, "You do not have to agree with me, Chief Justice. But you heard me. That is all I wanted." Her voice carried no anger, no pride, just something stronger. "Truth," said simply. One by one, others returned to their questions. But something was different now. The mood in the room had shifted. The questions were sharper, more pointed. No one wanted to follow her, but they had to, and no one wanted it to seem like they were trying to undo what she had just done. Even Roberts answered differently now. His responses were shorter, more precise. His usual calm tone replaced with something more serious. He was not defensive, but he was more aware. Outside the hearing room, it was already going viral online. Clips from Crockett's exchange were spreading quickly. People who usually ignored court hearings were now watching full segments during their lunch breaks. In days, a small cafe near Capitol Hill, a barista paused mid-order to replay one of Crockett's remarks. In a Dallas classroom, a young black girl turned to her teacher and asked, "Is she a lawyer?" And in homes across the country, people who had stopped believing in the system felt something they had not in a long time. Representation that did not come with conditions. Inside room 214B1, Roberts looked at Crockett once again, just briefly. But this time the look was different. No longer one of authority, but of recognition. It was not a look of defeat, but of understanding. She was not just another name on the rise. She was the moment. Even though the hearing seemed to return to normal, there was still one thing left she needed to say, because this was never just about rules or hearings. This was about what would be remembered later. On the surface, the room had resumed its regular rhythm, but anyone paying close attention could sense the shift. What started as a typical, tightly planned hearing had now been shaped, defined even, by a moment that could not be ignored, paused, or brushed aside. Crockett had stopped speaking, but her presence remained. Her words still filled the room, like a law not yet written. She had done more than challenge a Supreme Court justice. She had made the entire system take a breath. As the hearing moved forward and other representatives began their rounds of questions, Crockett sat silently, listening. No gestures, no side comments, just attention. She knew what had just happened. There was no need to repeat it. About half an hour later, once the questioning wrapped up, Chairman Bledsoe called for a brief recess. Members stretched. Staff moved about. A few reporters rushed out to file their stories. Roberts stood too, but before leaving the table he turned back. Crockett had not moved. "Congresswoman," he said, voice slightly softer than before, "your district is fortunate to have you." She looked up. "I know." He nodded, not out of formality or habit, but simply. Then he turned and left. He did not seem shaken, just quieter. As the room slowly emptied, a young woman from the gallery stepped forward. A law student from Missouri, wearing a blazer a size too big, walked up to Crockett slowly. "I just wanted to say," she began, "I never thought anyone would talk to them like that, not seriously." Crockett stood, adjusted her sleeve, and asked, "Talk to them like what?" "Like they are not above you," the student answered. Crockett smiled. "Not a big one, not rehearsed. Just enough. They are not." That was all. She picked up her notes and walked out of the hearing room, not saying another word. That evening, the moment made it onto national television. Not just political shows, but primetime news. It was not the confrontation that caught people's attention. It was the calm, the control. Like Crockett had not just made a point, but had offered a lesson. Analysts tried to frame it. Some said it pushed back on tradition. Others dismissed it as a performance. But those who watched it from start to end, those who listened instead of reacting, felt something else. Clarity. For years, people were told the Supreme Court was off limits, untouchable. But Crockett showed clearly, and within the law, that even the most protected powers can be questioned. That power with no limits is not order. It is slow failure. And maybe, just maybe, a bit of discomfort in that courtroom was exactly what justice needed. Because real change does not always show up loudly with crowds and slogans. Sometimes it enters quietly, through a single voice. A voice that stays calm even when pushed by power. And if someone like Jasmine Crockett can sit across from the Chief Justice of the United States and speak with honesty, then maybe others can do the same, where they are in their towns, in their jobs, in their homes. That is what moments like this are for. They are not just for the people in the room, they are for all of us. If this story connected with you, hit that subscribe button, because there is more on the way, and we are just getting started.